I've never been a big believer in ghosts. That's important to say up front, because if you told me this story before it happened to me, I'd probably roll my eyes. But after what I experienced 2 Halloweens ago, there's a part of me that doesn't sleep quite as soundly anymore. At the time, I was 23, living in a small town in Pennsylvania called Ridgemont. It's one of those places that feels permanently stuck between cozy and eerie, tree-lined streets, old Victorian houses, and that heavy silence that hangs after dark in quiet towns. I'd just gotten a job at a local hardware store and was still settling into adulthood. That October, I'd been house-sitting for a couple who lived a few blocks down from me. They were a retired pair who owned a big colonial-style home on Birch Hollow Road, a street that practically glows orange in the fall from all the maple trees. They were taking a cruise for 2 weeks, and since they trusted me, they offered to pay me to feed their cats, water their plants, and keep an eye on the place. The arrangement was easy. I'd go there after work, spend the night, and head out in the morning. The first few nights were quiet, a little creaky, but every old house creaks. Then Halloween weekend rolled around. It started with the front door. I was watching TV around 11 p.m. when I heard what sounded like the doorknob turning, not once, but twice. A soft jiggle, like someone testing it. At first, I thought it might have been kids playing pranks. The town was full of trick-or-treaters, and some liked to mess with people's porches. I turned off the TV and stood in the dark for a moment, just listening. Nothing. After a minute or two, I opened the door and looked outside. The porch was empty, just a few leaves blowing across the steps. Across the street, jack-o'-lanterns flickered on porches, but no one was out. I shrugged it off, locked the door again, and went back to watching my show. Around midnight, I started getting that uneasy feeling you can't explain, like someone's eyes are on you, even when you're alone. I tried to ignore it and went upstairs to bed. The house was old, so every step echoed. But just as I reached the top of the stairs, I heard something downstairs. The distinct creak of the front door slowly opening. I froze. For a second, I thought maybe I hadn't latched it properly earlier, and the wind pushed it open. But as I stood there listening, I realized the sound that followed wasn't wind. It was footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps across the hardwood floor of the living room. I whispered, "Hello?" The sound stopped. That was worse than anything. The silence. You can't mistake the feeling of a presence, even if you can't see it. My chest tightened. My breathing went shallow. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, aiming it down the staircase. The beam shook in my hand as I scanned the bottom floor. Nothing. The door was closed. Everything looked normal. Still, I couldn't shake it. I locked myself in the upstairs bedroom that night, pushing a chair under the handle like something out of a bad horror movie. I didn't sleep much. Every small sound, pipes, wind, the cats moving, made my skin crawl. The next morning, I tried to convince myself it had all been my imagination. I went downstairs, checked the locks, all fine. But when I looked at the back door, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There were muddy footprints on the porch outside, leading up to the door and then back into the yard. The owners didn't have any neighbors immediately behind them, just woods, thick, dark woods that led to a ravine. The prints were big, like from heavy boots, and spaced far apart. Whoever made them wasn't wandering. They were striding with purpose. I took pictures, texted them to the homeowners just in case, and told them I'd keep the doors locked tight. They laughed it off in their reply, said maybe a delivery guy got lost. I wanted to believe that. That night, I brought a baseball bat. Halloween night itself was when things truly went wrong. The day had that perfect small-town October feel, kids running around in costumes, leaves crunching, the smell of fireplaces in the air. I passed out candy until about 9, then locked up and settled in with a movie. Around 11, the house was quiet again. The cats were sleeping on the couch beside me. Then I heard it, a soft tapping from upstairs. It wasn't random. It came in pairs. Tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap. Like knuckles on glass. I muted the TV. The sound came again, a little louder this time. I walked toward the staircase, listening hard. It was coming from one of the upstairs bedrooms, the guest room that faced the backwoods. When I got to the top, the tapping stopped. The door to the guest room was slightly ajar. I nudged it open with the bat, heart pounding. The curtains were drawn, but faint moonlight leaked in through the edges. I took a cautious step closer and saw it. A handprint on the window, fresh, large, pressed against the glass from the outside. It was smeared, like someone had slid their palm down before pulling it away. I remember stepping backwards so fast I almost tripped. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911, and whispered what was happening. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line until officers arrived. They came within minutes. Small-town police don't get many calls like that. 2 officers searched the yard and the woods, but didn't find anyone. They said maybe it was a Halloween prank, maybe some drunk kids. But one of the officers, an older guy named Reed, looked at the window and frowned. He said, "Whoever did this climbed up from outside. Look, see that? Mud on the siding. Someone used the trellis to get up here." That detail made my blood run cold. I hadn't even noticed it. After they left, I couldn't stay there. I packed up, locked every door and window, and went home. The homeowners came back 3 days later, and when I told them everything, they brushed it off again, said it was probably just local teenagers. But 2 weeks later, I found out something that made everything click. A neighbor down the road told me that the year before, a man had been caught breaking into houses on that same street. He wouldn't steal much, just strange things like pillows, photos, and sometimes pieces of clothing. The creepiest part was that he'd always return them later, leaving them neatly folded on porches. When the police finally arrested him, he said he liked to watch people sleep. I don't know if it was the same person, or if someone else decided to copy him that Halloween. But every time I think about that handprint, I imagine someone standing outside in the dark, watching me through that window, and I remember the sound of the door turning, that small, quiet jiggle, and realize they weren't trying to scare me. They were trying to get in. Halloween has always been my favorite night of the year, or at least it used to be. I'm from a small town in upstate New York called Redfield Hollow. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and Halloween night feels like a movie. Streets packed with kids, porch lights glowing orange, and fog rolling off the lake. But the year this happened, everything about that night felt wrong. It started with a neighborhood prank that went too far. Or at least, that's what I thought at first. I was 17, staying home to hand out candy because my mom was working late, and my little sister Ellie was at a friend's sleepover. It was one of those rare, warm Octobers, and the air smelled like wet leaves and cold metal. Around 7, the trick-or-treaters started showing up. Pirates, vampires, ghosts, the usual. I had a horror movie playing quietly in the background while I handed out candy and scrolled my phone between knocks. Everything was normal until around 9:30. There was a knock, 3 slow, heavy knocks, that didn't sound like any of the light, giggly raps from the kids before. I looked through the peephole and saw someone standing on the porch wearing a pumpkin mask. Not a cheap plastic one. This looked hand-carved, thick, with jagged teeth cut into the rind and a candle flickering faintly inside. It was unsettling, like an old pagan costume instead of a modern decoration. The person was tall, maybe 6 feet, wearing a dark coat that hung almost to their knees. They didn't move. They didn't hold out a bag. Just stood there, staring at the door through that flickering pumpkin face. At first, I thought it was one of the older kids pulling a prank. I even laughed nervously and said, "Nice costume, man," while dropping some candy in the bowl. No response. No movement. After about 10 seconds of silence, I said louder, "You good?" Still nothing. I started to feel that primal discomfort, the kind that crawls up your back when something doesn't make sense. So I closed the door. When I peeked again through the peephole, he was gone. I told myself to shake it off, but about 15 minutes later, I heard a noise outside, the sound of something scraping against the siding of the house. Slow, deliberate scrapes, like metal against wood. I turned down the TV and froze. Then came another sound, soft footsteps across the porch. I called out, "Hello?" But nothing answered. I turned on the porch light and opened the door just a crack. The steps and driveway were empty, but there was something sitting on the welcome mat, a small pumpkin. It had been carved crudely, with uneven triangle eyes and a gash of a mouth. Inside, instead of a candle, there was a piece of paper. I picked it up, heart pounding. The note read in shaky handwriting, "Nice house, perfect view." I dropped it instantly. I called my mom, trying to sound casual but feeling my voice shake. She said it was probably a prank, kids messing around, and told me to turn off the porch light and call it a night. So I did. I locked up, double-checked the windows, and tried to distract myself with the movie. It was almost midnight when I heard the back door handle rattle. It wasn't a knock. It was deliberate turning, soft and slow. Then came another sound. Faint tapping on the glass, like a single finger tapping rhythmically. I grabbed the kitchen knife and crept toward the sliding glass door that looked out over the backyard. The porch light was off, but the moon was bright enough to see the outline of my backyard fence. And right there, behind the fence, stood the figure with the pumpkin mask. He was motionless again, head slightly tilted. The flickering candle inside that mask made the carved grin look alive. I shouted. I don't even remember what I said, and he didn't move, didn't run, didn't react at all. I backed away, locked the sliding door, and called 911 with shaking hands. The dispatcher stayed on the line while I turned on every light in the house. A patrol car arrived within minutes. The officers checked the yard, the porch, even the street. Nothing. No footprints, no dropped mask, no sign of anyone. They told me the same thing my mom did, probably a prankster. Halloween night always brought out a few weirdos. They told me to get some sleep. Sleep didn't come easy. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a sound that froze me completely. A creak, the sound of floorboards, the distinct groan of someone stepping inside the house. I held my breath, knife still under my pillow. Another creak. Closer, I texted my mom. "Someone's in the house." Then I heard it, the slow, dragging sound of something heavy being pulled across the floor downstairs. I slipped quietly out of bed and crouched at the top of the stairs. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might give me away. The living room was lit only by the faint light of the TV screensaver bouncing across the walls. And there, in the middle of the room, sat another pumpkin, a new one, freshly carved, candle burning inside. I almost screamed, but I clamped my hand over my mouth. I ran back to my room, locked the door, and dialed 911 again. The same officer came back with backup this time. They searched every room, every closet, the attic, the basement. Nothing. But what freaked me out most was when one of them pointed to the back door. The lock had been undone from the inside. They stayed until sunrise, then told me to stay with a relative until my mom got back. I went to my aunt's house for the weekend, trying not to think about that burning pumpkin. When my mom came home Sunday night, she wanted to check the security cameras. We had a small camera over the garage and another near the back deck. The footage made my stomach drop. At 11:47 p.m., you could see a man walking slowly up the driveway. He wasn't wearing the pumpkin mask. His face was blurred by the light, but he carried it, the same carved pumpkin, cradled like it was something alive. He set it gently on the porch. Then he walked out of frame. A few minutes later, the camera near the back caught something worse. It showed the same man walking behind the house, stopping at the sliding door, just standing there for a long time, his reflection faintly visible. Then he lifted his hand and pressed it against the glass, stayed like that for nearly a minute. And then he turned toward the camera and held up a piece of paper. The note said, "You shouldn't have looked." The police never found him. They said it might have been someone who knew us, a local, maybe someone who'd seen my mom's Facebook post about being out of town. We changed the locks, installed better cameras, even got motion lights. But every Halloween since, I've left the lights off and the door locked. I don't hand out candy anymore, because part of me knows that if I ever open that door again, I might see that same pumpkin face staring back at me. And this time, I'm not sure he'd stop at the porch. Halloween night, 2019, the last one before everything in the world changed. I was home alone that evening, watching horror movies with a few bowls of candy near the door. My wife was visiting her parents in Michigan with our daughter, so it was just me and the dog, Cooper, holding down the fort. We live in a quiet neighborhood just outside of Columbus, Ohio, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. And Halloween night always feels like a small town parade. Kids in costumes, parents chatting on driveways, the faint sound of laughter, and autumn leaves crunching under sneakers. It was a little after 9 when the crowd started to thin out. The littler kids had gone home, leaving behind a few rowdy teenagers who thought it was funny to scare people or grab handfuls of candy. I didn't mind. I used to be that kid. But around 9:30, something strange happened. I was cleaning up the living room when Cooper started growling, not barking, just this low, uneasy rumble. I looked toward the front window and saw someone standing at the very edge of my porch light. A tall figure in a long black cloak with a white plastic mask, like a dollar store version of a ghost or phantom. At first, I thought it was just another late trick-or-treater, so I grabbed a handful of candy and opened the door with a grin. No one was there, just the candy bowl sitting on the porch rail and a light breeze swaying the fake cobwebs. I glanced around, even stepped out onto the walkway, but the street was empty. Most porch lights were off by then, and the neighborhood had gone quiet except for the occasional distant laugh or barking dog. I shrugged it off, went back inside, and locked the door. About 10 minutes later, there was another knock. 3 slow, heavy thuds. I froze. The sound didn't come from the front door this time. It came from the side entrance, the one that led directly into our kitchen from the driveway. I flicked the porch light on through the security app on my phone. The side camera showed nothing but the dark driveway and a few fallen leaves swirling under the light. No figure, no car. That's when I started to feel uneasy. I opened the app again and scrolled back through the security footage, and sure enough, about 10 seconds before the knock, the motion sensor had triggered. There was a tall figure in a dark cloak walking slowly across the driveway. Then, gone. The footage just glitched out, like someone had stepped too close to the lens. I tried to convince myself it was some punk messing around, but something in my gut said otherwise. Cooper barked again, this time toward the back door. I grabbed a flashlight and went to check. The back deck creaked under my steps as I scanned the yard. Everything looked normal. The neighbors' lights across the fence, the jack-o'-lanterns on the railing, the quiet rustle of trees. Then I noticed something odd. One of the pumpkins had been moved. It was sitting right in the middle of the deck, a little closer to the door than before. I hadn't touched it all night. I leaned down to look closer, and I swear my heart stopped for a second. The pumpkin wasn't carved anymore, at least not the way it was before. Earlier, it had a goofy grin. Now, the face had been recarved into something jagged, uneven, with deep slashes for eyes and a mouth that curved into a crooked frown. The candle inside flickered like it was breathing. That's when my phone buzzed, a motion alert from the front porch camera. I spun around and opened the feed, expecting an empty frame again. Instead, I saw him, the figure in the black cloak, standing perfectly still at the edge of the porch light, his mask tilted upward toward the camera. It wasn't one of those normal Halloween masks anymore. It looked different, stretched, almost wet-looking, like something organic. Then, as I watched, he lifted one gloved hand and waved, slow and deliberate. I slammed the back door shut, locked it, grabbed Cooper, and ran upstairs to grab my phone charger and flashlight. I didn't even think about calling the police right away. I just wanted to make sure every door and window was locked. My hands were shaking so badly that I nearly dropped the phone. When I finally did call 911, the dispatcher asked if anyone was trying to break in. I said, "Not yet, but someone's on my property. He's been watching me for at least 20 minutes. They told me to stay inside, keep the doors locked, and wait for an officer to arrive." 5 minutes later, there was another knock. Not loud this time. Soft, rhythmic tapping, right below the living room window. Cooper went berserk. I turned off every light and peered through the blinds just enough to see the edge of my driveway. There was no one there, but the pumpkin, the recarved one, was now sitting on the window ledge, candle flickering. That's when I finally lost it. I retreated to the upstairs bedroom, shut the door, and stayed on the line with the dispatcher until I saw red and blue lights flashing through the blinds. The police arrived, did a full walk around the property, and found nothing. No footprints, no mask, no cloak, no sign anyone had even been there. Just that pumpkin sitting by the window. One of the officers, an older guy, picked it up and shook his head. "Kids," he muttered and set it on the porch railing. But before he left, he said something that made my stomach twist. "Thing is, these carvings don't look fresh. Looks like it's been like this for a few days." That didn't make sense. I'd carved that pumpkin that morning. They left around 11:30, and I sat in the dark for another hour, too paranoid to sleep. Cooper eventually calmed down and dozed off beside the bed. I finally closed my eyes around 1 a.m. The next morning, the pumpkin was gone. The candle, the mess of wax on the railing, everything. Like it had never been there at all. I checked the security cameras again, scanning through the footage from the night before. Every single clip between 10 p.m. and midnight was missing, just static. The same glitch I'd seen earlier, like someone had erased it. The only surviving frame was one image at 9:34 p.m. when the motion sensor had first triggered. The cloaked figure stood at the foot of my driveway, staring straight at the house. But behind him, in the darkness near the mailbox, there was something else, another faint shape, smaller, lower to the ground. It looked like another pumpkin. To this day, I still don't know who that person was, or if it was even a person at all. But every Halloween since then, I skip the decorations. I turn off the porch light, and when I hear a knock after dark, I never answer it.